Tonight, we explore the monsters of Greek myth and what they meant when a lamp was low, a door was bolted, and the gods still listened. Not as trophies, not as carnival masks, but as warnings with teeth. In these stories, fate is not a mood. It is a contract. Break an oath, cross a boundary, neglect a right, and something answers. The obstacles are never abstract. An armed gatekeeper, a jealous rival, a king's decree, a storm that closes a sea lane, a threshold marked forbidden in ash and salt. If you're still awake, tell us where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, settle in. Dim the screen, let the room go quiet, and notice the soft fan noise or the distant traffic, like waves behind a wall. On the north slope of the Acropolis, a scribe named Thrasos wets his reed pen and opens a wax tablet the size of his palm. The night air is cool and damp. The stone steps sweat, and his sandals squeak as he shifts his weight. He is copying a list for the city archives. Offerings owed, fines unpaid, names of men who swore a vow and then tried to wriggle out of it. The bronze lamp beside him coughs smoke, and soot pricks the back of his throat. A runner from the harbor has brought him a small thing wrapped in cloth, a sailor's sketch, drawn with charcoal on a scrap of sail. It is not a map in the modern sense. No scale, no neat compass, but a night map, made for fear. A whirlpool is marked with a black spiral. A cliff is drawn as a jaw. Beside a narrow strait, there's a shape like a dog with 3 heads and a chain. Thrasos has never seen such a beast. Still, his hand hesitates, because the drawing feels like a confession. He thinks of his brother, who signed on to a merchant ship last spring. If I keep my head down, Thrasos tells himself, no god will notice me. But he knows that is a lie people use when they are tired. In Athens, rules are carved into marble and murmured into wine. Hospitality must be honored, burial must be paid, oaths must be kept, the dead must not be cheated. Monsters arrive when those rules fray, when the polis cannot enforce what the gods demand. That is what a symbol is here, not a puzzle for scholars, but a tool the imagination uses to police reality. A Hydra is what a vendetta feels like when you cut it down and it returns. A siren is what longing does to a captain's hands when he forgets the wind. A gorgon is what shame becomes when it hardens into law. The ancient Greek mind turned pressure into creatures, so people could point, name, and obey. Thrasos flips the charcoal scrap and finds, on the back, a line written in a sailor's rough hand. We paid the offering. The sea still took him. A cold grit sits under Thrasos' nails as he rubs at the wax, smoothing a mistake. He can picture the harbor priests tallying coins, the quartermaster counting rations, the magistrate stamping a decree. Bureaucracy as a rope people hold on to when the world is wide and hungry. In the alley below, a dog barks once and then stops, as if corrected. Thrasos looks up toward the temple where the night watch changes. Somewhere beyond the walls, merchants are still awake, arguing over weights and measures. Somewhere beyond the sea, men steer by stars and rumor. The monsters are not out there merely to be slain. They are out there to explain why some crossings cost more than silver. He stands and walks to the cistern, because ink and fear make his fingers tremble. The rope over the well creaks as he hauls the bucket up. Wet hemp bites his palms, and the water slaps the clay rim like a hard breath in the dark. He rinses his hands, watching the black swirl away. A temple attendant passes with barley and honey cakes for the night offerings. Her hair is threaded with road dust, and she keeps her gaze down, not from humility but from calculation. If I miss a rite, she mutters, it will be my fault when the sickness comes. Thrasos has heard the same logic from magistrates and mothers. Blame moves until it finds a body to land in. By day the city pretends its rules are enough. Coins, contracts, witnesses. By night, the same rules need a sharper language. Monsters are that language. They translate invisible debts into shapes you can meet in torchlight. Hunger given claws, shame given eyes, the sea given a mouth. And the shapes are practical. The Greeks lived with real boundaries, passes that close with snow, wells that fail in drought, sea routes that force a choice between speed and safety. A monster is often the face of that choice, the reminder you cannot row straight toward what you want without paying. Thrasos returns to his lamp and studies the charcoal spiral again. He imagines a deck slick with spray, or wood creaking, men's shoulders burning as they pull away from a current that does not care. The sketch is not entertainment. It is a warning scratched into cloth. He scratches a marginal note beside the names of shipmasters. Consult the harbor priest, and the wax yields under his nail with a faint squeal. It is a tiny act, but it feels like placing a stone on a grave, an admission that the dead and the sea keep ledgers. Thrasos seals his tablet with a thumbprint in soft wax. He tells himself he is only copying, only recording. Yet he feels the smallest tug of dread, the sense that names on lists can become invitations. Down at the harbor, a new proclamation is being nailed to a post in the torchlight, and the wind off the water turns colder as if it has heard the words. Typhon. In Cilicia, where the earth smells of resin and hot stone, an old herdsman named Meles keeps his goats close. The wind has turned wrong, too warm, too fast, and the clouds above Mount Casios stack like bruises. He feels grit on his teeth when he speaks, as if the air itself is grinding. Down in the village, the elders have ordered every hearth to stay lit and every door to be barred, because storms here arrive like armies. A priest from the roadside shrine comes up the path, robe snagging on thorn. He carries a small bronze bowl for libations, and the metal is cold enough to sting Meles's fingers when he touches it. No singing tonight, the priest warns. No loud laughter. The sky is listening. The priest's motive is simple and human. If the lightning strikes the granaries, the village will blame the man who failed to soothe the gods. They both know the name that is never spoken lightly, Typhon. Not a wolf, not a serpent in a field, but a storm force given a body. The story says he rose with 100 throats and eyes like furnace doors, and when he inhaled, the sea drew back as if afraid. Even now, when thunder walks along the ridge, people say it is Typhon testing the bolts of heaven. Meles has heard the tale in winter, told by men who lost boats and wanted an enemy they could picture. Zeus fought the thing, they say, and the fight was not heroic pageantry. It was disorder trying to unmake the rules. Winds ripped roofs away, rivers ran backward, olive trees snapped like reeds. There is a reason the myth puts Typhon near volcanic ground. When the mountain groans, it feels like a chained prisoner shifting in his sleep. Tonight the mountain groans. When Meles was a boy, a traveling singer described the fight as if it happened just beyond the next ridge. Zeus came down like judgment, thunderbolts in his fist, and Typhon answered with winds that tore names off of things. For a moment, the singer said, even the gods panicked. Some fled in disguise, not out of cowardice but out of calculation, because if order falls, even immortals lose their stations. That detail always stayed with Meles. It made the story feel less like entertainment and more like a report. There was a darker turn the singer whispered only after a second cup of wine. Typhon, the storm made flesh, did not simply lose. He caught Zeus once. He wrapped him in coils, dragged him toward a cave, and ripped the sinews from his limbs as you might strip rope from a mast. In that version, the Sky King lay helpless while the world held its breath. A shepherd cannot prove such a thing, but he understands the feeling, when your hands stop obeying, when your strength is not yours. The rescue, they said, came from guile and speed. A messenger god slipping through smoke, a trick played at the cave mouth, the stolen sinews returned, the thunder reforged. It is not a warrior's lesson. It is a bureaucrat's lesson. Order survives because someone knows the back passage, knows which seal can be broken, knows which document is hidden in which box. The cosmos is a city with secret corridors. After Typhon was finally driven down, the story puts him under a mountain, Etna or Casios, depending on who is telling it, because that is how Greeks domesticated catastrophe. If the earth belches fire, then a monster is trapped beneath. If the sky drops hail the size of olives, then a monster is straining against a chain. The myth gives panic a location, a legal boundary. Here, beneath this rock, the disorder is contained. In the coastal towns, ship captains swear by Typhon the way they swear by reefs. They do not worship him. They acknowledge him the way you acknowledge a debt. A captain who wants to keep his men calm will blame Typhon for a sudden squall rather than admit he misread the clouds. It protects his reputation and reputation is a kind of currency on the sea. A low sound rolls through the soil, and Melese's goats crowd together, eyes white in the dark. He grips a staff made from ash wood. The grain is slick with sweat. On the ridge, a split of lightning exposes a shape in cloud, too broad, too alive. Then darkness swallows it. The priest pours wine into the dust. It hisses as if the earth is thirsty. In the village below, the headman is writing a decree by lamplight. No one leaves shelter, no one goes to the shore, and at dawn every household must bring a measure of barley to the shrine. This is what cosmic terror becomes in practical life. Rules, rationing, forced unity. Typhon is the fear that everything the city builds, walls, calendars, courts, could be overturned by something older than law. The Greeks imagined the world as a fragile arrangement held together by oaths and divine favor. Typhon is the nightmare of a rival constitution, a universe where the strong do not protect, where seasons do not return on schedule, where speech and agreement mean nothing. When you fear that, you cling harder to ritual bureaucracy. You count offerings. You police taboos. You make the unsteady world sign its name. Melese watches the priest's hands shake as he lifts the bronze bowl again. The old man thinks of his own private bargain. If the goats survive the night, he will finally pay the tithe he's been dodging. He hates the shame of being seen as small, yet he hates more the idea of being chosen for punishment. The wind strikes the hillside like a slap. Dust lifts in a spiral, and the goats bleat as the air fills with the smell of struck stone. Far off, an entire line of torches along the village wall flares and then gutters, one by one, as if a giant palm has passed over them. In the morning, ash will lie on the thresholds, and the headman's decree will be wet with new ink before it dries. Echidna. In the foothills of the Peloponnese, there is a ravine the locals avoid even at noon. The air inside it stays cold and wet, and the limestone walls sweat in silence. A goatherd's boy named Typhon stands at the mouth with a torch, listening to the slow drip of water. Smoke curls into his eyes and makes them sting. He tastes ash and minerals on his tongue. His uncle has lost 3 kids, small goats, not children, over the last week. Each morning the pen is open, the latch still tied, and the ground is marked with a dragged line as if something heavy was pulled away. The village council has argued about thieves, about wolves, about angry spirits. The truth matters less than the consequence. If the losses continue, the herd will shrink, debts will rise, and someone will have to answer to the landowner who collects rent and meat. Typhon wants to be the one who solves it. He is tired of being called only a boy, tired of watching grown men trade blame like coins. If I bring back proof, he tells himself, they'll stop looking through me. But fear crawls under that ambition. If he is wrong, if he wakes something older than wolves, the village will remember his name for the wrong reason. An old woman, half midwife, half gossip, has given him a hint wrapped in superstition. In that ravine, she said, the mother of teeth sleeps. She did not mean a single beast. She meant Echidna, the half-maiden, half-serpent who does not hunt as much as she breeds. The stories say she lives in a cave where the daylight dies at the entrance, and inside, she lays the seeds of future disasters. Typhon steps down into the ravine. Mud sucks at his sandals. A fern brushes his calf, cold as a fish. The torchlight catches pale scratches on stone, claw marks, too many to count. He hears a low rustle ahead, not like wind, but like scales sliding over grit. The cave mouth is narrow. He squeezes through, shoulders scraping rock, and the stone leaves a chalky dust on his skin. Inside, the air is heavy with a sweet, rotten smell, old blood, and damp hair. The torch flares, and for a moment he sees a shape that makes his throat tighten, a woman's torso, pale in the firelight, hair spilling like seaweed. Below the waist, the body continues into coils of dark, mottled flesh. Echidna does not leap. She does not chase. She watches with an expression that is almost calm, almost bored, as if she has all the time in the world because she is the world's patience made dangerous. Around her, half in shadow, are the signs of what she is, shells cracked like pottery, nests of straw, bones cleaned with care. A soft clicking comes from the darkness, small jaws testing themselves. Typhon's torch crackles. Hot resin spits and lands on his wrist, and he bites back a cry. He understands, suddenly, why villages make monsters of mothers. Not because mothers are cruel, but because what multiplies is hard to control. Echidna is anxiety about reproduction without supervision, the fear that threats do not arrive one at a time, politely, but come in litters, in seasons, in waves. In practical life, this fear shows up in laws and rituals that police what can be born and where. You mark the boundary of the city with stones and curses. You purify after childbirth, not because birth is dirty, but because it is powerful and unpredictable. You watch strangers, because strangers bring new seeds, new diseases, new customs, new claims. Echidna is that unease given a face. The dark cave where problems begin before anyone notices. Typhon forces himself to breathe quietly. He could run. He could throw the torch and pray. Yet he thinks of the landlord's ledger, of winter, of empty pens. His motive tightens into something stubborn. If I don't act, he thinks, we'll starve, and I'll be blamed anyway. He takes a small clay jar from his belt, pitch inside, sticky and sharp-smelling, and tips it onto the straw near the nests. The pitch crawls across the dry bedding like a living thing. When he touches the torch to it, the flame catches with a hungry roar. Heat blooms against his face, sweat breaks on his upper lip. Echidna's eyes narrow, not in pain, but in calculation. She slides backward into the deeper dark, and the clicking rises into frantic chatter. He has not killed her. He knows that as he runs. Echidna, in the stories, is rarely slain because the point is not victory, it is vigilance. If you cut away one nest, another can appear under a different shed, behind a different wall. That is why Greeks told mothers and officials the same kind of story. Watch what grows in the unattended corner. Back in the village, Typhon can already imagine the arguments. One man will demand a hunt, because hunts make men feel in charge. Another will demand a sacrifice, because ritual makes terror feel like procedure. The priest will insist on a purification at the spring, water poured over hands and tools, because contact with the breeding dark must be rinsed away before it spreads through the household. His hair smells singed, and his ears ring as if the cave is still whispering inside him. Typhon stumbles out, lungs burning with smoke, palms scraped raw by rock. Outside, the ravine wind feels clean and cruel. Behind him, in the cave, the fire crackles, and something small, many things, begins to move away from the heat, deeper into the earth. At dawn, the council will find fresh tracks leading toward the river road, and the gatekeeper will quietly ask for more guards. The Hydra. At Lerna, the ground never quite decides to be land. Water sits in shallow bowls of reed and mud, and the air tastes of rot and warm algae. A fisherman named Formian kneels beside his skiff and checks the pitch along the seams. His fingers come away black and sticky. He keeps glancing toward the inland marsh, where mist hangs low even when the sun is up. The king's men have posted notices in the village. No one draws water from the western pools. No one grazes animals near the sinkholes, and anyone who ignores the warning pays a fine in silver or in skin. People obey, not because they are convinced, but because fines are real and hunger is quicker than courage. Still, every week another dog goes missing. Another child comes home coughing, eyes red as if smoke has lived behind the lids. They call it the Hydra. Heracles arrives not like a shining statue, but like a tired laborer who has done too much in other men's service. His sandals are crusted with road dust. The lion skin over his shoulders smells faintly of old blood when the wind shifts. Beside him walks Iolaus, younger, carrying a bundle of torches and a bronze blade wrapped in cloth. Iolaus' inner conflict shows in the way he grips the torchwood until his knuckles pale. He wants to prove he is more than an errand boy, yet he fears being the one blamed if the hero fails. They step into the marsh. Mud grips their ankles like hands. Mosquitoes whine at their ears. Somewhere under the water, something exhales, a bubble rising with a sulfur stink. Heracles plants his feet, raises his club, and calls the monster out with an insult, because even beasts in Greek stories respond to reputation. The Hydra surges from the black water with a sound like wet leather tearing. Its heads, more than one, more than should be possible, lift and sway, tongues tasting the air. The creature's breath is a sour fog. When it moves, the reeds bend away as if the marsh wants to make room for it. Heracles strikes. Bone cracks. A head tumbles, hissing, into the mud. And then the problem shows its nature. From the next stump, flesh swells. Two new heads push out, slick and shining, eyes already angry. Phormion, watching from a distant rise, feels his stomach drop. He has seen disputes in the village do the same thing. Cut one rumor down, and two return. Fine one man for stealing nets, and his cousin retaliates. The Hydra is what a feud looks like when it grows teeth. Heracles hacks again. More heads. The marsh seems to laugh and bubbles. Iolaus shouts over the noise, voice cracking with fear and determination. He jams a torch into the stump where a head was. The flame bites. There is a hot iron hiss as burning pitch and blood meet. The wound seals into a black scar, and no new head grows. The method is brutal, almost bureaucratic. Cut, then cauterize, remove, then seal. Clean solutions, the Greeks understood, are rarely clean. To end a regenerating problem, you do not just strike. You burn, you scar, you change the landscape so the old thing cannot return in the same shape. That is why the Hydra became a symbol not only of natural menace, swamps, disease, poisonous water, but of corruption in the city. A bribe cut out by one magistrate returns in another office unless the system is scorched and remade. Lerna was not only a mythic place, it was a practical nightmare for farmers. Stagnant water meant fever. It meant cattle that wasted away. It meant roads that swallowed carts, and travelers who vanished when fog turned the path into guesswork. When a community cannot drain a swamp, it turns the swamp into a monster, because a monster can be negotiated with, warned about, blamed. A swamp is just indifferent. And notice who benefits from the story. A king can point to the Hydra and justify harsher control, curfews, patrols, new fees for safety. Even Heracles is bound in paperwork. His labors are not self-chosen quests. They are sentences, assigned by a ruler who wants a dangerous man kept busy and kept visible. After the fight, a messenger will carry word to Eurystheus, and Eurystheus, safe behind palace walls, will decide whether the deed counts, whether the rules were followed. Heracles drives the monster back, step by step, until its central body thrashes in the shallows. One head, larger than the rest, snaps with venom that steams on the mud. He pins it with his club, muscles shaking. Iolaus, face smeared with soot, brings the torch close, hands trembling. He thinks, if I hesitate, I will be the reason it rises again. He presses the flame to the neck. The smell is terrible, burnt meat, bitter smoke. The head goes still. When it is done, Heracles does not smile. He cuts the final head free and buries it under a heavy stone, as if filing a dangerous document where no one can reach it. Then he dips his arrows in the Hydra's poison, because in these stories even victory is a bargain. The tool that saves you now may curse you later. Iolaus wipes his mouth with the back of his hand and tastes salt and soot, wondering which part of this victory will be used against them. Back in the village, the king's herald reads a new notice aloud. The marsh is declared purified, but the taxes for the operation will be collected all the same: grain, oil, labor days repairing the road. Phormion watches the men nail the decree to a post. The hammer blows sound final in the damp air. Beyond the reeds, the western pools ripple as if something beneath them has not forgiven being sealed away. The Chimera. In Lycia, the hills are dry and sharp, and the wind carries the smell of sun-baked thyme. A smith named Ametrios stands at his forge before dawn, pumping the bellows until sparks leap like insects. The iron on the anvil glows the color of a pomegranate seed. When he quenches it, hot metal hisses in the trough, and steam fogs his face. He is shaping a spearhead for a man he has never met, a man sent by a foreign king with a polite request that feels like a sentence. The message is simple: make it heavy, make it strange, make it able to survive fire. Ametrios's motive is practical and anxious. If the weapon fails, the blame will not reach the distant palace first. It will land on the local craftsman whose name is easiest to punish. Outside the workshop, people speak of the Chimera in half voices, as if speaking too clearly invites it. A lion's front, a goat rising from the back, a serpent for a tail, three natures stitched together, breathing flame. It has been taking cattle and men along the mountain road, turning travel into a gamble. Merchants avoid the pass. Tribute caravans detour and arrive late. The governor complains about lost taxes. The monster is not only a terror, it is an economic problem. Bellerophon comes to the forge at last, cloaked dusty, eyes bright with a hunger that looks like confidence. He has been ordered to kill the chimera by a king who smiles while arranging death. One more errand for an inconvenient hero. Bellerophon's inner conflict flickers when he thinks no one is watching. He wants glory, yes, but he also wants to prove he cannot be disposed of like a tool. He has brought a new advantage. Pegasus, the winged horse, stamped and snorting outside, hooves ringing on stone. Ametrios shows him the spearhead, not sharp like a needle, but thick, with a hollow in the middle packed with soft lead. Not every monster is solved by cutting, the smith says. Some are solved by making their own nature betray them. Bellerophon nods, though he barely hides his disgust at needing advice. Pride is its own hybrid, half courage, half blindness. They ride up into the mountains where the road narrows and the air thins. The wind slaps Bellerophon's cheeks, his eyes water. Below, a shepherd's hut sits abandoned, door hanging off one hinge. The silence is wrong. No birds, no goats' bells. Pegasus's wings beat with a sound like sailcloth snapping, and the world drops away beneath them. The chimera appears on a ridge as the sun clears the horizon. It is larger than any story admits. The lion head roars, and the sound shakes dust from the rocks. The goat head bleats, a domestic sound made obscene by the way it comes from a body built to kill. The tail serpent flicks its tongue, tasting the air. When the beast exhales, flame rolls out, bright and greedy, and the heat reaches Bellerophon even in the sky. He dives. Pegasus screams, not in fear, but in effort. The spear in Bellerophon's hand feels slick. Sweat runs into his palm and makes the grip uncertain. He drives the heavy point toward the lion mouth, just as the monster draws breath to burn again. The lead inside the hollow spearhead meets the furnace of the chimera's throat. There is a moment of resistance, then a sound like fat sizzling on a pan. Lead melts. Smoke pours from the beast's jaws, bitter and metallic. The chimera thrashes, fire turning into choking vapor. It claws at its own face as if trying to scrape out the taste of itself. Bellerophon pulls up hard, chest tight, eyes stinging from the fumes. This is what the chimera symbolized, the terror of boundaries violated. The Greeks depended on categories to keep life stable: human and animal, citizen and foreigner, pure and polluted, lawful and cursed. A creature made of mismatched parts is not frightening only because it is strong, but because it suggests the world's labels can fail. If goat can be welded to lion and still live, what else can be joined? What else can become normal if no one stops it? So the chimera becomes a warning about the unnatural in many forms, about mixed bloodlines used as insults, about foreign weapons and foreign gods, about any invention that arrives too fast for custom to tame. It is also about inner hybridity, the way a man can be both hero and exile, both adored and targeted. Bellerophon knows this. As he watches the chimera stagger and collapse, he feels not triumph but a cold suspicion. If a king can order a monster slain, a king can also name a man a monster. After such a killing, villages do not simply cheer. They clean. They sweep ash from thresholds, wash soot from tools, and offer a portion of the first safe caravan's profit at the local shrine, as if paying the gods for reopening the road. Order, once broken, has to be recertified, like a seal on a jar after a rat has been found inside. When the carcass finally stops moving, the mountain smells of burnt hair and melted metal. Pegasus lands among shattered stone, wings folding with a tired sigh. Bellerophon wipes soot from his brow, and the black comes away mixed with blood from a small cut he didn't feel. Far below, Ametrios will hear the story and wonder if the lead he packed inside was clever or blasphemy that will need an offering. Down in the valley, a courier is already riding toward the palace with the news. By the time Bellerophon returns, the court will be smiling and measuring him, deciding whether his victory makes him useful or dangerous enough to require a new honor that looks like another trap. Cerberus. On the outskirts of a small town near Treason, A widow named Dion kneels at a grave that is not yet finished. The earth is damp and heavy. Clay grit packs under her nails as she presses a coin into the mouth of her dead husband, the way her mother taught her. The coin is cold. She does it with shaking care, because she has heard what happens to the unburied. They wander, thirsty, pressing their faces against the doors of the living in dreams. Her motive is not poetic. It is survival. If her husband's spirit is restless, the neighbors will whisper that the household is cursed. If the household is cursed, no one will hire her son. In Greece, reputation is a kind of law, enforced without a court. That night, while Dion's lamp burns low, the story reaches the town in another form. A rumor that Heracles is going down alive. Not to steal gold, not to plunder, but to fetch a guardian from the edge of death itself. People say the order comes from a king again, because even heroes are subject to paperwork. Bring back Cerberus, the decree says, as if a creature at the boundary of all things is an item to be checked out and returned. Heracles finds the entrance where the ground feels wrong underfoot, too hollow, too cold. A priest of Demeter meets him at a fissure in the rock and draws a circle in ash, muttering rules. No iron drawn too early. No boasting at the threshold. An offering first. The priest's inner conflict is plain in his tight mouth. He wants the glory of guiding a hero, but he fears the pollution that clings to anyone who touches the underworld. Heracles steps down. The air changes. It smells of wet stone and old smoke. His torch sputters, and the flame's light seems embarrassed, smaller than it should be. Somewhere ahead, water moves in darkness. At the Black River, the ferryman waits. His boat is narrow, made of rough planks that creak when weight shifts. The oarwood groans as he pushes off. Heracles can feel the cold rising from the water through the soles of his feet. The ferryman does not ask who he is. He asks for payment. Even here, law has a tariff. This is the first lesson Cerberus enforces from afar. Death is a border with procedures. You pay the toll. You follow the route. You do not simply walk back because you miss the sun. In Greek life, borders matter, between city and wild, citizen and outsider, living and dead. Without borders, everything contaminates everything. On the far bank, the ground is ash-fine, like powdered bone. Heracles walks past shadows that are not quite people, faces turned away as if ashamed to be seen needing. One voice whispers his name, and for a heartbeat he wants to answer. Then he remembers the rule. Do not bargain with the dead. Longing is a hook. At the gate of Hades, Cerberus rises. 3 heads, 3 sets of teeth, saliva roping from jaws onto the stone in thick strands. The dog's breath reeks of carrion and something metallic, like a coin held too long in the mouth. A chain runs from its neck into the dark, less a restraint than a statement. Even guardians are attached to authority. When Cerberus growls, the sound vibrates through Heracles' ribs like a drum. He does not strike with a blade. The agreement is clear, no weapons. He lunges with his arms, wrestling the beast the way a man wrestles a verdict. The dog's claws scrape stone, throwing sparks. One head snaps at his shoulder. He feels the sting of teeth through the lion's skin. Another head tries to take his forearm. Saliva slicks his grip. His lungs burn in the air that has no mercy. In that struggle, Cerberus is more than an animal. He is enforcement itself, the certainty that there is a point past which you cannot carry your status, your money, your cleverness. The Greeks feared death, yes, but they feared more the disorder of death without boundaries. Corpses left unburied, spirits returning, the underworld spilling into the street. Cerberus is the lock on the door, the guard who keeps traffic flowing one direction. In cities, you can see his shadow in mundane places. A watchman at the night gate, lantern in hand, deciding who may enter after curfew. A court official guarding the archive room where debts and sentences are kept on tablets. Even a household dog stationed at the threshold, trained to bark at strangers, because the home is a border too. Cerberus gathers all of that into one image. The idea that some crossings require permission, and some are denied forever. And the myth also admits a quieter truth. Enforcement is exhausting. Cerberus is chained because boundaries need maintenance. The dead must be counted, the rites performed, the offerings delivered, or the whole system strains. That is why Dion's coin matters. It is paperwork for the soul, a small fee that keeps traffic from backing up at the River of Forgetting. When Heracles finally hauls the dog upward, dragging it into daylight, the creature recoils, whining as if the sun is an insult. Its paws skid on the living earth. Foam flecks the ground, and the grass beneath it wilts, as if touched by frost. Back in town, Dion finishes packing the grave. She sprinkles water and barley, following the small laws that keep the dead in their place. In the distance, a horn sounds from the road. An official escort approaching, sandals slapping stone, a chain clinking like a warning. Before dawn is fully bright, the magistrate orders the gates shut, and every household is told to stay inside until the guardian has passed. The Minotaur. The ship leaves Athens in early light, and the oars dip with a rhythm that feels like a sentence being read aloud. Salt wind stings lips. On the deck, a father named Nicias keeps his hand on his son's shoulder as if he could hold the boy to the world by touch. The youth's hair smells of olive oil and smoke from the hearth they left behind. Around them, other families stand stiff, faces arranged into obedience, because grief in public can look like rebellion. The tribute is official. It arrives with seals, names, and numbers, 7 youths, 7 maidens, delivered to Crete as payment for an old death and an old humiliation. Athens calls it appeasement. Crete calls it justice. Everyone else calls it what it is, a controlled loss designed to keep a stronger power from burning your fields. Nicias hates the bargain, but he hates more the consequences of refusal. If I shout, he thinks, they will mark my house. A city survives on the appearance of unity. Fear is managed with procedure. Across the sea, Knossos waits, white walls bright under the sun. The harbor smells of fish, pitch, and sweating rope. A Cretan clerk meets the ship with a tablet and a stylus. He does not look at the children. He reads names. His motive is quiet and bureaucratic. If his count is wrong, he will be punished by a palace that treats error as insult. They are marched inland past frescoed corridors where bulls leap in painted grace, as if violence can be made decorative. The palace's center is not a throne room. It is a door in the floor, framed by stone polished smooth by many feet. A guard's torch smokes, and the soot clings to the back of the throat. The door opens, and cold air rises like breath from a buried animal. This is the labyrinth, not a magical maze in the abstract, but an engineered confinement. Twisting corridors, tight turns, chambers designed to confuse. A prison that makes escape feel like a personal failure rather than a political one. The Minotaur is kept here, the story says, because a king cannot show his shame to daylight. Theseus steps forward with the others, but he moves differently, shoulders squared, gaze steady. He has volunteered, some say. Others say the gods pushed him. Either way, he carries a dangerous motive under his calm. He wants to end the tribute, yes, but he also wants the kind of fame that changes how men speak his name in assemblies. He is risking himself for the city and for his own story. Ariadne finds him before the descent, not in a romantic haze, but in a corridor where servants hurry and secrets travel fast. She presses a spool of thread into his hand. The linen is rough, it scratches his palm. Her inner conflict is clear in the way her fingers linger and then pull away. Loyalty to her father's house, disgust at what that house feeds in the dark. If I help you, her eyes seem to say, I betray my blood. If I do nothing, I become part of the feeding. Down the stone steps, the air grows damp. The walls sweat. The torchlight makes the corridors flicker as if they are alive. Theseus ties the thread to a ring at the entrance and walks, letting it unwind behind him. Soon the sounds of the palace fade. Only footsteps remain, soft, cautious, and the distant drip of water. Then, a sound, a low, wet snort, followed by the scrape of horn against stone. The Minotaur emerges from shadow with the weight of a man and the head of a bull, nostrils flaring, eyes too human for comfort. Its breath smells of blood and old hay. The body is scarred, as if it has struck walls in rage for years. It does not speak. It does not need to. It is the palace's secret made flesh. The fight is close and ugly. Theseus feels the creature's hot breath on his face. He slips on damp stone. His hand finds a horn and grips. The horn is smooth, slick with condensation. The Minotaur's strength is raw, fueled by captivity and hunger. For a moment, Theseus's motive wavers. I wanted glory, he thinks, but I do not want to die in a corridor no one will ever name. He tightens his hold and drives his blade where bone meets throat. Warm blood splashes his forearm. The smell is copper and steam. When the Minotaur falls, the labyrinth does not open in celebration. It stays the same. Corridors, turns, blind corners. That matters. The monster's symbol is not only savagery. It is containment. It is what happens when a society hides its own violence and then feeds it in private, until the secret demands regular tribute. For the Greeks, the Minotaur also speaks to political economy. Tribute systems are monsters that regenerate. A payment made to avoid war becomes a habit, then a humiliation, then a reason for more payment. The labyrinth is the administration that maintains it: clerks, guards, schedules, ships, the smooth operation of cruelty. And the bull-headed thing at the center is the shame no ruler wants seen, the knowledge that power can be sustained by sacrificing the young. Theseus finds the thread with shaking fingers. Rope burn rises on his palm as he hauls himself back through corridors that want to trap him. Behind him, the air seems to exhale, relieved and angry. At the palace door, Ariadne is waiting, face pale, listening for alarms. By the time the sun sets, the ship is already pushing off from Crete, sails snapping in the wind. In Athens, Nicias will stand on the shore tomorrow, searching the horizon for colors that decide whether a household celebrates or collapses. And on the Cretan docks, a guard will be posted at the palace stair, torch held higher than usual, because empty cages make kings nervous. Medusa and the Gorgons. On a bleak shore beyond familiar trade routes, the world feels unfinished. The rocks are sharp, and the sea wind blows salt into every cut. A young fisherman named Lycos steps carefully among statues that should not be there. Men frozen mid-run, a dog with its mouth open, a bird caught as if in flight. The stone is slick with spray. He touches one figure and feels cold grit flake under his thumb. He backs away fast, heart thudding, because the elders have a rule: do not look too long. Do not stare. In a village, staring is how fights begin. In myth, staring is how lives end. Far inland, a king has sent Perseus on a task that sounds like honor and is, in fact, a disposal. Bring me the head, the order implies, and we will see if you return. Perseus carries the mission like a weight on his ribs. His motive is tangled. He wants to protect his mother from a man's claim. He wants to prove his birth is not a joke, and he fears that if he fails, the story of him will be written by enemies. He finds help where help always lives in Greek tales, in rules and gifts. A goddess offers guidance but demands respect. Nymphs provide tools but require proper approach. Perseus receives a curved sword, winged sandals, and a polished bronze shield that reflects like still water. When he straps it to his arm, the metal is cool and heavy, and the strap bites into his forearm as if reminding him who owns the advantage. The path to the Gorgons passes through a bureaucratic nightmare of its own. The old women who share one eye, the bargaining, the withholding of directions until the right pressure is applied. Even monsters are accessed through systems. Perseus learns, in sweat and frustration, that you do not reach forbidden places by courage alone. You reach them by knowing where the leverage is. At last, he comes to the Gorgon's dwelling, a hollow of stone where the light seems bruised. Two sisters lie coiled in sleep, bodies scaled, hair moving as if underwater. Their faces are terrible, yes, but what freezes Perseus is not ugliness. It is the feeling of being judged without trial. Medusa sleeps apart. Unlike her sisters, she is mortal. Her breath is shallow. The snakes in her hair shift and click softly, wood against one another. Perseus kneels, careful not to let his shadow fall across her face. Torch smoke is forbidden here. He works by the gray light of dawn. He raises the bronze shield and watches her reflection. In the mirror surface, Medusa's features are almost human. Cheekbones, a brow, lips parted. Then the snakes lift, sensing. Perseus feels cold sweat gather at his lower back. He thinks, if I meet her eyes, I will become a monument to my own mistake. He swings without looking directly, guided by reflection the way a sailor steers by stars he cannot touch. The blade meets flesh with a wet sound. Blood sprays, warm, onto the sand. The smell is sharp, iron-rich. Medusa's head tumbles, and the snakes writhe, mouths opening in silent fury. Perseus fumbles for the sack meant to hold it, hands shaking, because even a severed gaze is dangerous. Behind him, the other Gorgons wake. Their cries are like metal scraping metal. Wings beat. Stones shudder as they lunge. Perseus runs, sandals lifting him just above the ground, heart hammering, because the boundary he crossed is now enforcing itself. What did Medusa symbolize? To the Greeks, the gaze was not harmless. A look could shame a man into violence, could brand a woman as spoiled, could turn rumor into verdict. Reputation hardened quickly, like lime into stone. Medusa is the fear of being fixed by accusation, of being reduced to one story, one face, one scandal, until you cannot move inside society anymore. She is also a warning about taboo and punishment. Medusa's myth ties her to violated sacred space and to a transformation imposed as sentence. Whether you read her as victim or threat, the lesson the Greeks absorbed was practical. Some acts bring consequences that change your social body. You become other. You become untouchable. And the community uses that transformation to police itself. Don't cross that line, they say, or you will wear the mark. That is why Gorgon faces appear on practical objects, on shields, on temple thresholds, on drinking cups. A frightening face can repel fear the way a loud bark repels a thief. Soldiers paint the wide eyes not to celebrate monsters, but to borrow their deterrence, turning terror into a civic tool. Even the bronze shield Perseus used carries this logic. Polished metal as a legal workaround, a way to approach taboo without direct contact. Perseus does not stop to mourn. Heroes rarely do. In Greek logic, the world's accounting is bigger than individual tenderness. He flies over the sea, the sack thumping against his hip, feeling the head's weight like a secret. Below, Lycos the fisherman watches a gull drop from the sky, wings stiffening into stone as it passes too near the hidden gaze. As he flies, bronze dust from the shield's rim grinds into his wrist where the strap has rubbed raw, a small pain that keeps him awake through the long night. When Perseus reaches a chord again, the head becomes an instrument, shown, concealed, weaponized. That is the final cruelty of the symbol. The curse can be carried and used by others. In the palace hall, torches will flare as the sack is opened, and somewhere a rival will realize that a look, carefully aimed, can do what swords cannot. The Sirens. In a narrow stretch of sea where the water turns an unnatural blue, a ship's captain counts his rations twice. The men are thin. Their hands are cracked from salt and rope. The oarwood creaks with every stroke, and the sound is like a tired animal. Odysseus stands at the stern, listening not for waves but for something else, an absence, a hush that means a coast is too quiet. They have been warned about the Sirens by a woman who knows the sea's secrets the way accountants know debt. Do not listen, she said, as if giving a legal instruction. Plug your ears. Find your clever man. In Greek life, survival often depends on obeying advice that feels humiliating. Pride is expensive. Odysseus orders beeswax warmed in a bowl. The wax smells faintly sweet, like old honey left near a fire. One by one, the sailors knead it and press it into their ears. It is an intimate, awkward ritual, grown men touching one another's heads, making themselves temporarily deaf. A deckhand named Eurylochus hesitates. His motive twists inside him. He fears being made a fool, but he fears more the captain's anger and the sea's appetite. He lets the wax seal him off from sound. Then they bind Odysseus to the mast. The rope is rough, it scrapes skin. As they tighten knots, Odysseus feels the burn across his ribs and thinks, if I cannot control myself, I do not deserve command. That is the bargain. He wants to hear and live. He wants knowledge without consequence. The ropes are his insurance. The ship glides closer to low rocks where white bones gleam in the sun. No gulls circle. No fish jump. The world seems to hold its breath. Then the singing begins. It is not loud. It slides into the mind like warm oil. Even through distance, the song seems to know names. It promises not sex in a crude sense, but understanding. Your father's mistake explained, your enemy's motive revealed, the map of the world unfolded with no missing edges. Odysseus's eyes widen. His throat tightens. The mast presses into his back. He pulls against the rope until it bites harder, and the fibers leave red tracks across his skin. On the rocks, shapes move, women, birds, something between, mouths opening in perfect, gentle timing. The air carries the scent of seaweed and sun-heated stone. Odysseus hears praise woven into melody. You, who have suffered, you who have seen. His heart lurches, because he has always been hungry for the story that makes suffering worthwhile. He begins to shout orders. Cut the rope. Turn toward the sound. He pleads, then threatens. The sailors, ears sealed with wax, see only his face, eyes wild, jaw clenched, and row harder, because they can feel the current pulling them in. Their muscles burn. Blisters split. Salt stings raw skin. One man vomits over the side, without slowing his stroke. This is what the Sirens symbolized, the seduction of knowledge without labor. The Greeks prized cunning and song, but they also feared the mind's appetite. A sailor who stops rowing to listen dies. A statesman who chases praise forgets the grain supply. A judge who loves clever arguments more than truth lets injustice slip through. The Sirens are the voice that tells you your desire is noble, right up until the rocks break your hull. They also represent the danger of private craving inside a public system. Odysseus is a leader. If he turns the ship, everyone dies. The myth makes that lesson concrete. Curiosity is not always a personal vice. Sometimes it is a collective risk. That is why Greek communities built restraints, oaths, councils, checks on kings, because a single man's longing can wreck a whole voyage. Sailors treated these stories like coastline charts. A reef cannot be argued with, but a crew can be tempted into it, by fatigue, by the hope of a shortcut, by the belief that this time the rules will bend. So the tale gives the reef a voice. It makes hazard speak, because men respond to speech. The wax, the binding, the rehearsed plan, all of it resembles a temple ritual, except the offering is your own freedom. In the cities, older listeners heard another layer. The Sirens sound like persuasive men in the assembly who promise easy victories and painless taxes. They sound like advisors who flatter a ruler into reckless war. Greek culture admired rhetoric, yet distrusted it, because speech can steer a crowd the way a song steers a ship. The Sirens are rhetoric without responsibility, beauty that refuses to carry the dead it creates. As the ship passes, the singing sharpens into anger, like a smile turning. Odysseus thrashes until the mast groans. Eurylochus watches him with a dry mouth and a new fear, not of monsters, but of the captain's own mind. If this is what desire does, he thinks, what else is he capable of when the ropes are off? At last the sound falls behind them. The sea resumes its ordinary slap against hull planks. The men scrape the wax out of their ears with shaking fingers, and the world rushes back. Wind, groans, the creak of wood. Bits of wax drop onto the deck and stick to bare feet, warm for a moment before turning hard and gritty. They untie Odysseus. He stands swaying, sweat-cold, eyes fixed on the horizon as if he has lost something precious. No one speaks of what they almost did. Shame is another kind of silence. The ship angles toward open water, but the wind shifts just slightly, and a gull cries once overhead, an omen that the sea is still watching for moments when a man mistakes wanting for knowing. Scylla and Charybdis. The strait is narrow enough that the cliffs feel like walls. Odysseus's ship enters at dawn, when the light is thin and the shadows are long. The water here behaves like an animal. It surges, pauses, then surges again, slapping hull planks with impatient hands. Salt spray coats lips. The oarlocks squeal as men adjust their grip. On the left, a whirlpool opens and closes, Charybdis, breathing in the sea as if drinking. When it inhales, the surface drops, exposing slick rocks. When it exhales, a heaving swell rolls outward, strong enough to spin a ship like a toy. On the right, a cliff face is pocked with caves, black mouths in the stone. From one of those mouths comes a sound like a dog's bark stretched into something sharper. Scylla. Odysseus has been warned. He carries the warning like a stone in his stomach. Hug the cliff, the advice said. Lose a few, not all. It is the kind of counsel that makes you hate the one who gives it, because it turns slaughter into arithmetic. He calls the crew to the center of the deck and speaks in a calm voice. He does not tell them everything. He says the currents are tricky and the men must row hard. His motive is grim and protective. If panic spreads, they will veer into the whirlpool and vanish. Yet he feels guilt coil in him, because leadership sometimes means lying with a steady face. The rower's shoulders flex. Oarwood creaks. Rope burns palms as they pull. The ship edges toward the cliff, close enough that Odysseus can smell damp stone and see barnacles like old scars. The caves above are silent. Then the silence breaks. 6 long necks snap out of the darkness, each ending in a head with teeth like fish hooks. Scylla does not roar. She takes. The heads dart down with a wet, efficient speed. Men scream once, then the sound is cut off. Odysseus feels a spray of warm blood hit his cheek. The ship lurches as weight leaves it. For a heartbeat, he wants to turn, to fight, to throw spears upward. But Charybdis gapes beside them, and the sea begins to draw down, pulling at the hull. He makes the decision the myth refuses to soften. He keeps rowing. The crew sees their friends lifted into the air like offerings, and they cannot reach them. A sailor named Paramedes grips his, or so hard his palms split. His inner conflict flashes in his eyes. Obey the captain and live, or disobey to save a brother and drown with him. He obeys, because terror makes cowards of love. Scylla's heads retreat into shadow, chewing. Above, bones clatter softly as if the cliff is counting. The ship clears the cliffside only to meet Charybdis's exhale. The whirlpool erupts into a surge that slams the stern. Water pours over the deck. Men cough, choking on brine. A mast rope snaps with a crack like a whip. Odysseus grabs the rail. Wetwood is slick under his fingers. The ship spins half a turn, then steadies, as if spared by chance or by a god's bored mercy. When the strait finally widens behind them, the survivors collapse at their oars, shaking. No one sings. The air tastes of iron and seaweed. Odysseus looks at the empty places on the benches and feels the weight of the choice settle deeper. I did what kept most alive, he tells himself, and the sentence sounds like a defense offered in court. That is why Scylla and Charybdis became symbols of logistics and impossible decisions. Greek life was full of narrow straits. Grain shipments that must sail in storm season or not arrive at all. Armies that must choose a pass and accept an ambush risk. Magistrates who must punish one family to prevent a feud from swallowing the polis. These are not moral fantasies. They are survival math performed with shaking hands. The myth insists there is no perfect route. If you insist on purity, no loss, no compromise, you may lose everything. Yet if you accept loss too easily, you become the kind of leader the gods eventually punish for coldness. The strait is a test not only of seamanship, but of conscience. Greek sailors spoke of such places the way farmers speak of drought, as conditions you cannot argue with, only plan around. They memorized winds, watched birds, hired pilots who knew local currents, and still lost ships because the margin between safe and fatal was sometimes a boat's width. The monsters give that margin a face. Scylla is the cliff hazard that plucks you if you drift. Charybdis is the systemic catastrophe, one bad timing, one wrong tide, and everything is swallowed. And notice the social cost of steering through it. Odysseus withholds the full truth because a crew is a small society. Too much fear becomes mutiny. Too little fear becomes carelessness. Leaders in Greek cities face the same problem when announcing plague, or war, or shortages. Disclose enough to secure obedience, not so much that panic breaks the marketplace. The strait is also a lesson in information control. Paramedes wipes seawater from his eyes and tastes blood mixed with salt. He watches Odysseus's back and thinks, if he can leave men to die, will he leave me next? Suspicion is another current, pulling at the crew's unity. The oars' leather grips squeak as the men reset their hands, each stroke now sounding like a reluctant oath. The wind shifts behind them, carrying a faint, distant bark from the cliffs, as if Scylla is still keeping time. Ahead, the sea looks open, but the sky to the east has a thin, bruised band of cloud, like a fresh mark on skin, promising that the voyage's next choice is already forming. Polyphemus the Cyclops. The shore is calm, almost welcoming. The grass is thick. Wild goats scatter at the sound of boots. Odysseus's men laugh for the first time in days, because the island smells of milk and fresh water instead of brine and fear. They find a cave stocked with cheeses stacked like pale stones and baskets of curds covered with woven lids. A young sailor named Antiphus reaches for food with greedy hands. Hunger makes him careless. Odysseus hesitates at the threshold, feeling the rule of hospitality like a pressure behind his eyes. In Greece, you do not raid a house you enter as guest. You wait. You offer respect. But the men are tired, and Odysseus's inner conflict shows in his jaw. He wants to be both a clever raider and a lawful man. He chooses the half measure. Eat a little, wait for the host, prepare a gift. At dusk, the host arrives. Polyphemus fills the cave mouth, one eye glaring like a round, wet stone. He carries a load of wood as thick as a mast and drops it with a crash that sends dust billowing. He rolls a boulder across the entrance, stone grinding stone, and the sound is final, like a gate slammed by a judge. The men cough as dust coats their throats. In the dim, the smell of sheep, sour milk, and old dung becomes suffocating. Odysseus steps forward and recites the expected script: greetings, gifts, the promise of reciprocity. Polyphemus does not answer in that language. He asks where they come from, not out of curiosity, but out of predatory accounting. Then he reaches out, grabs two men, and smashes them against the ground. Bones crack. Blood darkens the dirt. He eats without haste, chewing like a man chewing bread. Hospitality law, Xenia, was not polite decoration. It was infrastructure. It allowed travel, trade, diplomacy. When it fails, the world becomes a chain of hostile rooms. Polyphemus is the nightmare of a shore where the rule does not apply, where no one fears reputation because no one else's opinion matters. He is raw force outside the city's reach. Greek listeners would have noticed what Polyphemus lacks. No council, no marketplace, no altar smoke rising from a shared shrine. He keeps wealth, cheese, lambs, but he does not exchange it, and he does not recognize the invisible web of obligations that makes a polis. That is why he feels monstrous even before he eats anyone. He lives outside the network where shame and honor regulate behavior. For communities sending ships to unfamiliar coasts, this fear was practical. A foreign shoreline might offer water and shelter, or a host who treats you as meat. The myth teaches a protocol: never trust abundance, respect thresholds, do not let hunger make you violate the very law you hope will protect you. It also admits a darker truth. Greeks used monster language to label people beyond their control, turning outsiders into warnings to keep citizens loyal to home customs. The men weep silently, because crying loud will invite attention. Odysseus's mind races. If he kills the Cyclops, they cannot move the boulder. If he does nothing, they will be eaten one by one. His motive hardens into calculation that feels like sin. I will sacrifice pride to save breath. He takes a skin of wine, strong, dark, and offers it. Polyphemus drinks, surprised, then delighted. The wine stains his beard. He demands more. Odysseus pours and speaks his name as nobody, a trick that tastes bitter in his mouth because it reduces him to a shadow, yet it is necessary. The Cyclops sways, eyelid heavy, and finally collapses among his sheep with a grunt that shakes the cave. Odysseus's men bring the stake they carved earlier from olive wood, its point hardened in the fire. The wood is hot and smells sharp. Their hands tremble as they hold it over the embers. When the point glows, they lift it together. Rope burns their palms as they brace, because in panic they have tied their wrists to keep from dropping it. They drive the stake into the Cyclops' eye. A scream fills the cave, high and animal. The smell is immediate: burning flesh, hot blood, smoke. Odysseus feels bile rise. Polyphemus thrashes, hands clawing at his face. He roars for help, and other Cyclopes answer from the hills. "Nobody is killing me," he shouts, and the others, hearing the trick, laugh and go back to sleep. Cleverness works, but it leaves a sour aftertaste. The world is saved by a lie. At dawn, blinded and raging, Polyphemus rolls the boulder aside to let his flock out. He sits at the entrance, hands sweeping, ready to catch escaping men. Odysseus ties each sailor beneath a ram, fingers sinking into thick wool damp with dew. The wool smells of lanolin and cave. He presses his cheek against it and hears the animal's heartbeat, steady, indifferent. They pass under the Cyclops' hands one by one. Polyphemus pats the rams' backs, missing the bodies hidden below. The men hold their breath until their lungs ache. When they are outside, they run for the ship, feet slipping on wet grass, hearts hammering. Polyphemus follows the sound and hurls a rock toward the sea. The boulder crashes, sending a wave that nearly capsizes the ship. Odysseus, safe for the first time in hours, cannot resist shouting his true name. Pride rises like a fever. He wants the monster to know who outwitted him. The consequence is immediate, because this is a world where words carry legal weight. Polyphemus lifts his face to the sky and calls on his father, Poseidon, to punish the man who broke him. A curse is not poetry. It is a petition filed with a god. The sea around the ship darkens as if ink has been spilled, and far off, thunder answers like a stamp on wax. The Harpies. In Thrace, in a hall that once smelled of roast meat and cedar smoke, King Phineus sits before a table he cannot use. The bread is laid out. The fish is steaming. A cup of wine catches torchlight and glows red. Yet no one reaches for food. Servants hover with eyes lowered, as if waiting for a judge. Phineus's hands shake as he lifts a piece of bread toward his mouth. His motive is a knot of hunger and dread. He is starving, but he is more afraid of the pattern that will repeat. He has been punished, the stories say, for seeing too much and speaking carelessly. Prophecy treated like a weapon, truth sold for favor. In a world ruled by gods, knowledge is never free. A wind rushes through the hall, although the doors are barred. The torches gutter. Then the Harpies arrive. They are not sleek birds. They are hunger made filthy, winged women with talons, hair whipping, faces twisted in a kind of bureaucratic contempt. Their wings beat hard, and the gust scatters crumbs across the floor. Wet feathers slap against Phineus's cheeks. The smell hits like a blow, rot, dung, brine, the stench of a midden thrown over fresh food. They snatch. They do not eat neatly. They tear meat, drag fish, scoop bread, and whatever they cannot carry they foul. A cup overturns. Wine runs across the table like spilled blood. One harpy lands, claws scraping wood, and leaves a smear of filth that makes a servant gag. The food is ruined in seconds. This is not just a monster attack. It is a collapse at the table, the place where order is supposed to be renewed through shared eating. In Greek life, banquets and communal meals were political infrastructure. They sealed alliances. They displayed hierarchy. They distributed meat from sacrifices, turning divine favor into human calories. When the table is contaminated, trust frays. Phineus slams his fist down, and the wood shudders. He tastes bile. "I will pay any price," he whispers, "if they just let me finish one meal." His shame is thick. He knows the gods are making a point, and he hates being the point. Outside, two strangers arrive, winged sons of the north wind, hired help with a hero's sheen. They have come because Jason's ship needs directions, and Phineus is the only man who can see the safe route. Here is the exchange at the heart of the myth. Information traded for protection. Even curses can be negotiated with the right force. When the Harpies strike again, the hall becomes a storm of feathers. The strangers leap, blades flashing. One Harpy shrieks and darts upward, claws scraping a pillar. The men pursue, but the chase is less triumph than sanitation, driving contamination out of a space so life can resume. Servants scramble to cover remaining food, hands slick with spilled oil. One boy slips and cracks his knee on the stone, biting back a cry because pain is less urgent than hunger. The Harpies are finally driven away toward the sea, where their wings throw spray and salt into the air. But even in retreat, they leave a lesson behind. The Greeks feared famine not only as emptiness, but as spoilage, grain moldy with damp, fish turning bad, stores stolen by vermin or by officials. Hunger is bad. Hunger after theft is worse because it feels like betrayal. That is why Harpies symbolize the theft of rations and the anxiety that order can collapse from within. In a siege, food disappears and everyone suspects everyone. In a drought, prices rise and the poor are blamed for waste. In a household, a larder's smell can signal moral failure. Someone didn't manage the stores, someone didn't honor the gods, someone let impurity in. The Harpy turns that creeping fear into a single violent moment at the table. The chase, in the old telling, stretches far beyond the hall. The winged brothers drive the harpies over forests and cliffs until the sea opens under them, and the birds will toward lonely islands where no one wants to land. Even there, the harpies are not simply killed, because some forms of contamination cannot be ended with blood. A goddess messenger intervenes and sets terms. The harpies will stop tormenting Phineas, and the pursuers will stop hunting. The curse becomes a contract, sealed not with ink, but with exhaustion. That detail matters. It shows how Greeks understood public order, not as permanent purity, but as managed boundaries. You cannot eliminate rot, hunger, and theft forever. You can only negotiate space for life to continue. Set rules, enforce them, accept that threats circle at the edge. Phineas finally eats. The bread is dry, but it stays in his hand. Tears run down his cheeks, hot and embarrassing. He speaks the directions Jason needs, not out of generosity, but out of relief. The relief of a system restored, a bargain honored. Afterward, the hall is treated like a sick room. Doors are thrown open to air it out. Herbs are burned in a brazier, bay, thyme, smoke curling into corners where feathers lodged. Hands are washed again and again, not because water can erase fear, but because ritual gives people something to do while appetite returns. When the strangers leave, feathers still cling to the rafters, damp and dark. A servant scrapes the table with a knife until the wood pales again, wrist aching. In the town outside, the magistrate's clerk begins to draft new rules for grain storage and night watch. Because once a community imagines its food can be stolen by winged filth, every pantry starts to feel like a border that needs guarding. The Sphinx. The road to Thebes is crowded with the smell of sickness. Smoke from funeral pyres hangs low, and it scratches the throat when you breathe. A guard at the city gate wipes sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of ash across his skin. He has been posted here for weeks, watching travelers turn away because the road ahead leads to a question no one wants to face. On a rocky rise above the gate, the Sphinx waits. She is lion-bodied, winged, with a woman's face that looks almost calm in the wind. Her claws grip stone. Her eyes are steady, as if she has all the time in the world. She does not leap to kill like a beast. She speaks. She offers a riddle, and if the answer fails, she kills the speaker and leaves the body to rot where others can see it. The corpses are part of the mechanism. They are evidence. They say, meaning is enforced here. In Thebes, the monster's presence is tied to civic breakdown. The city is in crisis, plague, infertility, panic. People whisper that the gods are angry, that the king's house is stained. The Sphinx stands at the threshold like a customs officer of the mind, demanding the correct password before anyone can enter a future. The riddle is not trivial. It is a test of interpretive power, the kind priests and kings claim when they read omens and issue decrees. A traveler named Oedipus arrives dusty and tired, sandals worn thin. He has been on the road because he is running from a prophecy that has already found him in his sleep. He wants, more than anything, to prove he is not trapped. He wants to outthink fate. That desire, control, beats hard in his chest. It is also the desire the Sphinx is built to punish, because the Greeks knew. Intelligence can be a form of hubris. The riddle is asked. The wind carries the words down to the waiting crowd. Oedipus listens, eyes narrowed, and feels the strange quiet that comes when a mind locks onto a problem. He answers correctly. The creature that changes its number of legs through life is the human being. The crowd exhales as if released from a held breath. The Sphinx throws herself from the rock, wings snapping once, and vanishes into death. A hero is crowned. The gate opens. But the myth refuses to treat this as a clean victory. Because the riddle's answer, human, is also the accusation. The Sphinx symbolizes the terror that the real problem is us. Our bodies age. Our judgments change. We stumble into mistakes and call them destiny afterward. In practical Greek life, riddles served power. Initiation rites, secret cults, even ordinary civic offices required specialized knowledge. Not everyone could speak in assembly. Not everyone could read. A certain class of men controlled interpretation, of law, of omen, of precedent. The Sphinx is that control made monstrous. She guards the city not with walls, but with meaning. If you cannot speak the right answer, you do not pass. The plague around Thebes makes this sharper. In crisis, people crave certainty. They turn to those who claim they can decode the gods. That creates opportunity for manipulation. A priest can demand more offerings. A ruler can blame foreigners. A family can accuse rivals of pollution. The riddle becomes a tool to channel fear into obedience. And yet, the Sphinx also represents a necessary boundary. Some thresholds should demand knowledge. A city cannot let anyone lead an army or judge a case. Expertise matters. The myth holds both truths in tension. Gatekeeping protects order, and gatekeeping can become tyranny. The bodies at the gate are not only horror, they are public policy. They warn travelers away, reducing traffic, slowing the spread of disease, keeping strangers from becoming scapegoats inside the walls. The guard understands this in a grim way. He hates the sight of carrion birds picking at flesh, but he also knows fewer newcomers means fewer mouths to feed when grain is scarce. In crisis, cruelty can masquerade as prudence. The Sphinx's riddle also mirrors the way cities tested loyalty. A stranger might be asked his lineage, his patron, his village, as if identity were a password. In court, a man's credibility could depend on whether he knew the right formula, the right precedent, the right god to swear by. Knowledge opened doors. Ignorance closed them. So the monster is a gatekeeper not just of cleverness, but of social belonging. And there is a hint of foreignness in her shape. Part beast, part woman, winged like creatures painted on imported pottery. Greeks traded with Egypt and the Near East, hearing strange stories, seeing strange art, and feeling both fascination and unease. The Sphinx can carry that unease, the fear that outsiders bring puzzles your local rules cannot answer. When the familiar categories fail, people invent a creature to stand on the border and ask, "Who are you, really?" Even the answer, human, is a civic mirror. It suggests that the city's suffering is not cured by killing a beast. It is cured, or worsened, by how humans walk through time, as children, as adults, as elders, changing needs, changing power. The Sphinx demands that Thebes remember this, even as it tries to forget. Oedipus enters Thebes to cheers, but his relief is thin. He has beaten one question. He has not escaped the deeper one. What if the prophecy is not a puzzle to solve, but a trap to live through? That night, he washes his hands in cold water, scrubbing road dust from his nails, and stares at his own reflection as if it might answer back. Before morning, an oracle attendant arrives at the palace with a new message tied in red thread. Outside, dogs howl along the walls as the wind changes, carrying the smell of smoke toward the city again. Lamia/Medusa. A small house in Corinth settles into night. The hearth is down to red coals, and a faint smell of ash clings to the room. A mother named Dion listens to her infant breathe in uneven little waves. Outside, footsteps pass on the street, then fade. A cold draft slips under the door beam and raises gooseflesh on her arms. She wants to sleep. She also fears sleep, because sleep is when you miss the sound that matters. In Greek stories, Lamia comes in the hours when lamps sputter. She is sometimes described as a beautiful woman with a predator's hunger, sometimes as a creature who can pull out her eyes and set them aside, freeing herself to roam without the pain of seeing what she has become. The myth often makes her a punished figure, once a queen, once a mother, cursed so that her children are taken, and her grief turns outward into a monstrous appetite for other children. It is a cruel logic, trauma that becomes threat. Medusa is kin to this fear, a night demon said to shift shape, appearing as a woman, then revealing animal legs, flashing teeth, vanishing into shadows. Travelers tell stories about her on lonely roads. Soldiers whisper her name in barracks. The details vary because the function is stable. She makes the dark feel populated by predation. For the Greeks, the home was the smallest unit of order. It held the family line, the household gods, the stored grain, the loom, the dowry chest. It also held vulnerability. Children, slaves, women, elders. Night threatens that order because it hides faces and loosens social surveillance. A thief looks like a ghost. A stranger's knock becomes a test. Lamia and Medusa symbolize what the city cannot patrol, the private terror behind a locked door. Dion checks the door bar again, fingers brushing rough wood. She hates herself for being afraid, because her husband will laugh at her in the morning and say she listens too much to old women. Yet she remembers her neighbor's baby who died last month, tiny body wrapped in cloth, and the way everyone searched for a reason that could be named. Fever is too random. Fate is too cold. A monster is easier. A monster can be blamed, warded off, bribed with amulets. In the myths, Lamia is linked to Hera's jealous punishments, to divine politics spilling into mortal cradles. That matters. It frames infant death not as meaningless, but as consequence, harsh but legible. Greek religion often tried to make suffering legible. Ritual gave parents something to do with their hands. Hang a charm, smear soot in a protective mark, whisper a prayer to Hecate at the crossroads. Practical actions to manage unbearable uncertainty. Medusa adds another layer, fear of seduction and deception. She appears as something desirable, then reveals the predator. That speaks to anxiety around strangers and sexuality, around the way desire can lead a young man off the safe road and into debt or disgrace. In a culture where inheritance and legitimacy mattered, the wrong encounter could poison a family line as surely as any curse. A night watchman passes Dion Street, lantern swinging, oil smoke trailing behind him. He tells himself he is brave, but he is mostly tired. He wants his wage, and he wants the magistrates not to accuse him of negligence if a theft occurs. When he hears a soft sound, maybe a cat, maybe a child crying, he feels his heart jump, angry at his own body for betraying him. Monsters, he realizes, are partly the name we give to our nerves. Near midnight, the infant stirs and whimpers. Dion lifts him, feeling the warm weight against her chest. She hums, a low sound meant to cover the silence. The baby's tiny fingers clutch her tunic. For a moment, she imagines a face at the window, eyes reflecting the coals. She turns her head fast, and there is nothing, only glass dark as water. Lamia and Medusa patrol the threshold between inside and outside. They remind listeners that safety is maintained, not assumed. They teach the habit of vigilance. Lock the door, keep the fire, watch the stranger, mind the crossroads. In this way, the monsters serve public order by disciplining private life. These night demons also reveal how fear can be aimed. When a child dies, a community looks for a culprit, and the easiest culprits are those already on the margin: an old woman who lives alone, a foreign nurse, a midwife with a sharp tongue, a widow with no male protector. Stories of Lamia could slide into accusation, turning grief into social punishment. In that way, the monster is not only outside the home. It can be the community's own hunger for blame. At the same time, the tales function like a second lock. A mother who believes in Lamia keeps her baby close, keeps strangers at a distance, keeps the hearth tended. A young man who believes in Medusa avoids lonely roads and cheap temptations. The story disciplines behavior, which is why it survives. It is a lullaby with teeth, comforting because it offers an explanation, frightening because it demands obedience. Even Lamia's eye motif, setting eyes aside, touches a practical dread that predators can watch without being watched. In a world lit by oil lamps, darkness is a cloak. The city can post guards, but the alley behind your house remains yours to defend. The myth turns that burden into a face you can imagine, and therefore, in a small way, manage. Before dawn, a neighbor knocks softly and leaves a new amulet on Dion's step, a small charm shaped like a crescent. Dogs bark in the alley as if they've caught a scent. In the first pale light, Dion notices scratches in the dust near her door, and she cannot tell whether they are from a cat or from something that walked upright and did not want to be seen. Aftermath. Long after the hero's songs fade into background noise, the monsters remain, quietly, in the places where rules thin out. Picture an old man in a small island tavern, salt crusted in his beard, turning a cup in his hands. The cup's clay is warm from wine, and its painted figures have worn smooth where other fingers have held it. He is not a poet by trade. He is a dockworker who has seen ships come home with fewer oarsmen than they left with. He tells stories because the night is long and because memory, if not shaped, can rot. He traces a spiral on the cup. Maybe it's a decorative pattern, maybe it's a hint of a maze, and he says, softly, that every city builds a labyrinth somewhere. Sometimes it is stone corridors under a palace. Sometimes it is a chain of favors and debts that no outsider can navigate. He remembers watching officials hide bad news behind paperwork, the way a Minotaur is hidden behind walls, the shameful appetite that is fed so the public face stays clean. Across the room, a sailor with rope-burned hands listens and pretends not to. He wants to believe he is tougher than stories. But when the wind rattles the shutters, his shoulders tighten. He has heard Typhon and thunder over open water. He has watched the sea turn from calm to murderous in minutes. He knows that order is not a permanent condition. It is something you rebuild, like a wall after an earthquake. On a beam above the hearth hangs a small Gorgon face, carved in wood, darkened by smoke. It is there to keep harm away, the way it was kept on shields and doors. The dockworker's wife insists on it. She is tired of funerals. She is tired of rumors that petrify neighbors into silence. She wants her home to feel protected, even if protection is only a carved reminder to be careful. Outside, in the street, a mother hurries her child past the crossroads shrine, not because she expects Lamia to leap from shadow, but because she knows how quickly misfortune chooses a house. She has hung a crescent charm. She has checked the doorbar twice. She has done what people do when they cannot control the world. She has built small rituals into habit. At the harbor, a grain inspector counts sacks, tapping each with his staff, listening for hollow spots where thieves might have scooped the best grain out. He worries about harpies not as winged women, but as the simple fact that food can vanish, stolen, spoiled, delayed. He wants to be honest. He also fears being accused of corruption if any sack is short, because accusation is its own kind of monster, multiplying heads like Hydra. Near the quay, a navigator lays out his tablet and checks the stars, remembering the Sirens. He knows knowledge is a sweet danger. Every new shortcut, every untested route, could bring profit or ruin. He tells himself he's brave. The truth is he's calculating, choosing between Scylla and Charybdis in a smaller form, risk a storm for speed, or lose money by waiting. He makes the choice with a swallow and a prayer. In a hillside village, a herdsman counts lambs at dusk, thinking of Polyphemus. He leaves a small portion of cheese at a roadside stone, an offering to hospitality itself, because he has seen what happens when a stranger is treated as prey. He wants the gods to remember his house kindly. He also wants travelers to remember it, because memory is protection. This is what the monsters symbolized, the pressure points of life made visible. Storm and quake, hunger and shame, seductive knowledge and impossible choices, death's border and the lawless shore. The Greeks did not tell these stories to escape reality. They told them to map it, to give fear a shape so fear could be managed, shared, and, sometimes, resisted. The dockworker finishes his wine and looks at the door as if expecting someone. His inner conflict is simple and human. Part of him wants to believe the world is safer now, that he has outlived the worst. Another part remembers how quickly safety breaks, and he cannot lie to himself. He stands, joints creaking, and tosses a few coins on the table with the heavy sound of finality. He passes the cemetery road on his way home. The gate is chained, and a lean dog sniffs where incense was spilled earlier. For a second, he imagines Cerberus there, not as three heads, but as the idea that some lines cannot be crossed. He thinks of the coin placed with the dead, and of how such customs keep grief from turning into chaos. At the town's edge stands a weathered marker with a carved riddle from an old festival. Children use it as a game now, but the elders remember when words at the gate were not a game, when a wrong answer could mean exile. The Sphinx lives in that memory, meaning as a threshold, belonging as a test. From the harbor, a conch horn sounds the late watch, and he remembers the sea's own tests, songs that lure, straits that demand a sacrifice, storms that erase charts. A man can do everything right and still lose 6 oarsmen in one narrow passage. Back in his doorway, he pauses. He can smell hearth smoke through the cracks and hear the clink of a bowl inside. He touches the wooden Gorgon face on the beam, more habit than faith, and steps over the threshold as if crossing into a safer world. As he steps outside, cold air hits his face like clean water. In the dark, far beyond the lamplight, the sea gives a low, constant murmur. Somewhere above the island, clouds pile up without stars. A distant flash lights the horizon for an instant, and then the night closes again, as if the old rules are being tested once more.